So as we look into DC Visit, here on this July 4th in NA, hopefully the NA server team, since they had less to do than EU and JP, got to enjoy their time off for our federal holiday here. Happy 4th. And if they are American, there's plenty of other people in North America, you know, maybe they're Canadian and they got Canada Day off and now they're just working a normal July 4th. So, but I assume they're all Los Angeles based. So the question was, why are there not South American servers? And so if I want to scroll up to the exact question here in Twitch chat, because we were busy reacting to some lovely Quasi content, Gustav asked, what do I think about Square Enix adding a new data center to South America? It's sad because it seems like no one cares about us. So I think there's something different when it comes to South America than when it comes to like the addition of Oceanic. Oceanic was the first time we added a new data center in a region that we did not have one since EU. EU data centers came online long ago. The MOG station and all of our cosmetics was actually introduced to the game to fund the EU data center. And we have since seen that expand into 2 data centers, and those data centers have now, as of this patch, gone from 6 worlds apiece to 8. JP in that time has expanded from, I believe they started with 2 and they went to 3. They are now moving from 3 to 4, but they were already at 32 worlds, so it's the same number of worlds, just split across more servers, data centers, so that they have better login capabilities. North America had Aether and Primal as far back as I can remember, but they added Crystal back in, I believe, patch 4.57 back in 2019. And so it's been a while. We've had 3 for a very long time. And we have 8, 8, and 8, so we have 24 worlds, and so we are, you know, a pretty large region. Now, the North American data center is very close to Central and South America relative to kind of EU data centers for sure, and so when people come and ask us, Work to Game, about Central and South American, I assume that's because they're already playing on my server. I assume they're already playing on my data center. I live in Texas, so we have a very large Spanish-speaking population here. And so I know that much of that Central and South American comes from Spanish language support. So while the official response has always been, we would love to add the ability to support more players whenever that makes sense, whenever possible. It's always been this loose, politically correct. We're not saying no, we're not saying yes. If we can ever do it, we will. There has been a general frustration about the lack of action based on that. It has been asked at, I believe, every media tour. There are Spanish-speaking creators invited to the media tour, and there are, you know, Spanish publications invited to the media tour. And so for them to not have access, that doesn't feel very good. And when we compare that to Oceanic, which also had a community that was basically playing on Tonberry, so they were trying to form like an English-speaking pocket on Japanese servers for reasonable ping, or they were jumping all the way to NA or EU for terrible ping, but to be around fellow English speakers, there were certain portions of the community that felt very frustrated to see Oceanic, which they believe, and it may or may not be smaller than Oceanic, to not see Central or South America brought up much in the same way. Obviously, we're going to, you know, as an analogy here, we're going to compare it to when male Vieira got announced, but female Roth, they said, it's coming, but then they didn't give us a time. And so Roth players have felt a little bit slighted in some cases. But this is not just a racial thing. This is not just an optional piece of cosmetic content. This is affecting the way they log in each and every day. This is affecting their ping, their ability to do Savage content, the way their party finder would work. Because in theory, a Central and South American data center would be predominantly Spanish speaking. And whereas the EU data center has whole pockets and even servers, is my understanding, that historically help favor certain languages, and the game does support French and German, there is not a Spanish speaking set of cutscenes, and there is not a predominantly Spanish speaking server here on North America. I don't actually know where the majority of Spanish speakers play. And so to my knowledge, it's kind of just left them there. Now, the game is designed to run on 250 ping, which is a massive ping. And so it is, in theory, theoretically possible to clear the vast majority of content with whatever ping you're at, especially if you have less than that. You might be able to clear, especially all but Extreme Savage and Ultimate content, and many people with terrible ping get through that content as well. Ren Karagani is a Savage player who plays from East Coast, which is not great, and it causes a number of problems. It comes up in various media tours, these questions about high ping, but it's more than just a ping question. It's also language. It's also language. So it's more than just can they play classes that single or double weave. This is also language. So why did Oceanic get selected over Central or South American? There's never been an official response, but I believe that the reason that Oceanic went first as far as being the 4th data center versus Central and South America is I believe that it required less onboarding of support for English-speaking tech support and customer service. Square Enix does not have a flawless record when it comes to customer service, and that's within languages they have already agreed to do the business. And so I do believe that Oceanic was allowed to piggyback off of the existing English-speaking infrastructure internally for things like all of their internal coordination with server structure and all that, as well as external-facing things like customer service, should you ever need to file a report or a ticket or have an issue with a MOG station purchase or whatever. So I believe that was easier. I also believe that they did not then have to change the way the game did anything. There would be something very, very, very weird from adding a Central and South American data center if they added no new language support. If they kept the game supported in English, Japanese, French, German, which I believe that's all 4. I think it's just 4. And so if they did not add support to the amount of in-game text and voiceover, that would kind of suck, right? Because they would roll it out as this official Square Enix product, so it would get introduced not just to the existing fans who would have a better experience, and that's wonderful, but I'm hoping that Oceanic has also allowed people from the Oceanic region to try the game who'd never heard of it. And so you would be asking for people's initial experience with Final Fantasy XIV to have them log into a game that does not support game localization, does not support Spanish, does not have a localization team that renames the quests to all of the inside jokes and the funniness that is both A, regionally appropriate, but B, adds something to it. There are all sorts of things that the English localization team does that aren't in the original Japanese, but they wouldn't make sense for them. And I assume there's things in Japanese where they're playful on concepts and things that are roughly parallel, analogous, but are different than they are for us. Because it's not necessarily the same references. And so I would hope that they would bring on a Spanish localization team, a Spanish community support team, a Spanish customer service team, and would have Spanish text in-game. And so I think when you talk about that, that is an immensely different amount of cost compared to the rest of what the worldwide version supports. Now, I'm ignoring the isolated versions, things like China, that operate different than us anyway, because localizing for China is just a totally different topic. But when you're comparing Oceanic to Central and South American, I think localization, things like language support, are the reason we don't have it. So, does that mean we would never get it? Everything you just talked about, those aren't going away. Let's assume they decide Spanish, and we just have to say, sorry, Portuguese speakers. Many of you know a little bit of Spanish or can get by in Spanish. You're just going to have to deal with the fact that the game is only supported in English and Spanish. Let's assume they're willing to do that and pick Spanish over Portuguese, because I believe there's more worldwide speakers of Spanish versus Portuguese. And so they would have to pick. It's not perfect, right? Just like in Europe, French and German is not everybody by any stretch, but French, English, and German collects a pretty significant majority. So what do? You add Spanish. Fine. Do they ever do it? Well, the problem is you have to go back and you have to redo not just existing content. It just can't be 7.0 and forward is brought on with Spanish voice acting. It has to be also, let's assume it's Spanish and Portuguese. It also has to be all past content. You have to remember, they just redid Praetorium and Castrum, and those got no new additional voice acting. None. Voice acting is incredibly expensive. Incredibly expensive. It goes through all sorts of work. They've had multiple panels around things like FanFests on what the timeline looks like to get the language support and all of that in multiple voice languages. What it takes to even have a cutscene that is a certain length and say, we don't want one cutscene to be 10 minutes and another cutscene to be 5 minutes. So how do we say the same thing in multiple languages so that it has the same gravitas and yet also has the same conciseness? That's tough. That's really hard. And so assuming they could bring Spanish and Portuguese on at the same time, you're now jumping from 4 languages to 6. And so, how would you go back and support 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, 6.0, and then 7.0? The best time to do that would be if you were ever going to redo 2.0 content. Now, right now, with Duty Support, they're going back and possibly remastering content. We don't know. But they have talked about, because we're seeing some dungeon changes. Every time the Duty Support system adds something, we're seeing some changes. The game, we already know, is getting graphically, visually remastered slowly, sectionally, piece by piece. So if there was ever a time to add Spanish support, I'm not saying they will, but those of you that are asking, would they ever add Spanish and or Portuguese support? Would they ever, throughout that process, then allow for them to add localized data centers, which would mean that they had customer support, localization, language support, all of the things to offer the premier product? Yoshi P does not want to make something functional. He wants to make something a good experience. If it can't be a good experience, there have been many times where he's chosen not to do it at all. It's one, like, among other things, it's why, example, we don't have Blitzball. If they can't do it right, they don't want to do it at all. And think of all the things that haven't landed right. Think of all this Hildy drama. Think of Blue Mage drama. That's them doing their best. So think of all the things that get cut because they think it's not even something they can defend. It's not even something Yoshi P wants to begin to apologize for. He's apologized so much this year, and there are things that get cut because he knows in advance he would have to apologize for it, and he does not want to do that. So, when would be the right time to do it? I think the right time, in my opinion, would be to announce that they have been behind the scenes adding Spanish voice support as they remastered the game. And so, as the remaster works through the game, 6.2, obviously moving us into, but not completing, Heaven's Word content, we're not there yet. But by 6.4, 6.5, somewhere in there, we will have redone all the way to Stormblood. So if you were ever going to announce Spanish support, they would only have Shadowbringers and Endwalker to make it back through. I think that sometime during 7.x or 8.x, I think that that's the earliest I would see this. So I think we are looking at least another 2 years before they would ever publicly address this, assuming internally they had already decided yes. Keep in mind that with the change to the housing lottery, they announced that in May of 2021, and it released in June of 2022. That was a simple technology change. That didn't really... They tried for it not to affect any existing homeowners. They tried for it not to do anything to new. It still was way less than perfect. It still required an apology. And so when you look at how long it takes something to get into this game, the fact that to localize in those countries and have localized server support, which is one of the things that's being asked for, there are all sorts of legal hoops they have to jump through to make sure that now they are officially operating out of those countries. Does that open up their terms of service to needing to have any additional terms in those? There are all sorts of, now do they need to be able to process localized currencies? Now do they need to, there are all sorts of questions. It's not just flip a switch and use AWS localized to Central America and then just tell them it only runs in English, freaking deal with it. Your customer support hours are tied to North American customer support. I don't know what to tell you. It's not that simple. There is a much bigger thing. So I would not take their lack of action on it as a lack of internal desire. I would take their lack of public action on it as a desire to be respectful. Because if they ever were going to add it, I would not want them to just be like, well, we typed the MSQ into Google Translate and hit publish. Good enough. I think they would want to release it as a more completed product, because I think it would be not only a chance for those of you that speak English and therefore have been able to join us, but it would be a chance to onboard Spanish and or Portuguese speakers from an entire region of the world who may not be familiar with that much of the Final Fantasy franchise. And Yoshi P has recently stated that he feels incredibly let down by what some things like Final Fantasy XV have done to represent the Final Fantasy franchise. He does not want Final Fantasy XIV to be part of what he considers that embarrassment. He would want to release it as a finalized product. So that does not mean he does, but I would not expect a South American and Central American update on these until he was absolutely prepared to do it and do it right. And so I hope that is all it is. I hope that they are working on it internally and that they're going to do it secretly. I don't want them to say, yeah, we're going to do it, and then it doesn't release till 2027, and now you're stringing that community along. So I would hope that by the time they announce it, they are not only ready to announce what it means, but they are ready to announce a timeline. They are ready to announce when early testing will go into place, how it affects the existing population, what does it mean for anybody that's on existing server structure, what does it mean as far as adjustments to the way the game is paced or priced in that region. I would hope that they would do a really great job of having all of those questions ready to be answered and backed up by not only their marketing team and their community teams, but by their legal team. So they were ready to back this up with very real, very full-featured Square Enix support that held up to every dollar for a publisher that we expect great things of. They don't always deliver great things, but that we expect great things of. So that's how I view this. Obviously, it's very easy for me not to get too emotionally hurt about this because I have localized support for me. I have the ability to, when they translate the live letter into any language except for Japanese, it's my language. The localization team that is most well known in my part of the world speaks my language and lives in my country. The official, when they come over and do events in my country, which they do, personally, when they can travel, they have done events in the United States, they are only 2 time zones away from me. And so I understand that I am saying all of this from a point of bias that I cannot escape. I am 100% not saying any of this from a point of discomfort because it is very comfortable to play this game in English. I get to spend my currency on a website that is hosted and designed to run in my country for servers that run in my country with my language. And I understand that, that means that I don't understand the pain people are going through. But when I try to look at it from why would Square Enix choose not to support more people where they could make more money and where they have an existing community that loves and adores them and wants to share it with their friends and family that maybe aren't comfortable playing a game where they have to do it in English and they have to do it with bad ping, while I can try to imagine what that would be like, my assumption is that Japan is not ready to bring something like that on until they are ready to take on all the cost and the work to do it right. Now, Yoshi has said the reason they're not on Xbox is that it's hard to work for Xbox when they're too busy trying to bring the PS5 version on. Okay, PS5 version's done. Where's my Xbox version? So I would assume they were not willing to begin work on a Central or South American data center until, I would assume, South American, because it addresses the ping better than North American, right? Because Central just kind of puts 2 next to each other. I would assume they would go South American. I would assume. Because it helps with more distance. And then I would hopefully add Spanish support to all data centers. So then Spain would play on EU, maybe Mexico would play on NA, and so I would assume they would go South American for ping and then let the language ripple over all data centers. In case there's a Spanish speaker in Japan, awesome. And so what would they do there? Well, I would hope they would add translation to the whole game. I would hope they would add translation to their internal teams so that if somebody was having an issue installing the game, they could get support for technical questions in a native language. And I don't know if they have that capability now. So that's where I think they're at, and I would hope that, now that Oceanic is working, now that Oceanic's online, I hope Oceanic is immensely successful. They see it as this huge boon. Oh my god, there's all this added revenue, all these new users, overwhelming positive support, and that they go, wow, how do we do that again? And somebody internally goes, I think South America might be the next market that we could expand into. The next Oceanic region, the next overwhelmingly positive supported place that we could grow this game. That's where I think it would be there. And I think that there are, other languages throughout the world that would love to see support. Other regions throughout the world that, may have bad ping because of their distance from a server, and so seeing more servers pop up in more places might be nice. The Oceanic players that have already established on EU would tell you do it sooner than later, because once you're established in a community, there are Oceanic players that now feel they can't migrate to Oceanic because they would have to leave all their friends behind. So obviously it's very easy for a new Oceanic player to hop on Oceanic, but now what do you do for people that have been playing on EU for years? So sooner better than later. But all that to say is that's where we're at. They have not said no. They have not said yes. They have kept it really loose, and I hope that's because they are deciding how to do it right, not secretly thinking there's no way we'll ever do that. Kinda.